tres, pa' abajo. 1, 2, 3, pa' abajo. 1, pa' abajo. 2, pa' abajo.
You really need on how to protect your property. Also making sure that we have a staff of very highly trained insurance agents whose primary job here is really to help kind of demystify a lot of confusion that's out there. Not every insurance agent understands the short-term rental market, and very few companies actually have experience in paying claims in this market as well, which we'll get into a little bit later. Proper insurance, just as a whole. Custom Pen developed an insurance policy specific to short-term vacation rental with Lloyd's of London in 2014. Again, specifically designed for short-term rental owners. Essentially, the way we call it is a commercial homeowners policy, and it's completely replacing the current coverage entirely on the risk. It also covers both personal and commercial use of the property, which is important for those who like to use their beachfront condos for themselves every once in a while, or their mountain ski resort properties. You're fully covered for either type of occupancy, personal or short-term rental. It completely covers the building contents, loss of revenue, as well as commercial liability. It's a $1 million limit on the commercial liability with a $0 deductible, and currently sitting at just over 40,000 policies written with insureds in all 50 states. And in fact, I think we insure all 3 vacation rentals in North Dakota. So yes, every state has a vacation rental, believe it or not. As a homeowner, ultimately you have 3 choices for your property. And the 3 types of insurance policies out there are landlord insurance, or a DP dwelling policy, most commonly used for long-term rentals. There are loopholes in that coverage. Standard homeowners insurance, basically designed for your owner occupancy of a property. Typically no coverage for rental or business occupation of an address. Yes, there are big loopholes there. And then some type of commercial policy. There are still loopholes in commercial insurance. No insurance policy can cover everything, but we'll dive into which policy might be best suited for your particular application. One thing we need to understand, whether you're experienced with insurance products or not, is that all insurance policies are 2-part. Part 1, property insurance. Part 2, liability coverage. All 3 of these products, landlord, homeowner, and commercial, they all carry property coverage and liability coverage. But as we go further into this presentation, understand that every policy has its limitations. They have their exclusions, and if it's excluded, it's not covered. Or they have big limitations, and so just because it says one thing doesn't necessarily mean you're fully covered for that particular application. So property insurance, basic definition is it's insurance that provides financial reimbursement to the owner or renter of a structure and its contents in the event of damage or a theft. Example, your house burns down, your property insurance pays to rebuild the structure and replace your content. Liability insurance, the second part of your insurance policy, is what provides protection from claims arising from personal or bodily injuries or damage to other people or property. So in our case here, vacation rental guest trips on a box or slips in the shower in your home and breaks their arm. They then sue for their bodily injury. That's your liability insurance to protect against that.
Wow.
Now, insurance is always a contract, and a big question and how most vacation rentals are insured across the United States is with a landlord style insurance policy that has some type of language in it that says we cover vacation rentals. I'm going to play a short video here, and this is going to dive into some of those limitations in regards to guest vandalism at a property.
An Atlanta man is warning people about an insurance loophole that is making him foot the bill of thousands of dollars in damages after a group of teens turned his rental house into a party house. Channel 2's Lauren Posen is live in Midtown with the key words you need to look for in your insurance policy. Lauren.
Well, Freddie Mills lives in Midtown and his home is in Nashville. That's the home he rents out. Now, this is his insurance policy, and he thought everything would be covered if anything were to happen, but he did not read the fine print, and, well, that's what he's paying for now.
Of course, I feel violated by not being informed whenever I was buying the policy that it would not cover these types of situations.
Freddie Mills used red awning to rent out his second home in Nashville. Renters threw a raging party, some of it captured on his outdoor security cameras.
It's about $10,000 of damage to the property and about $2,000 or $3,000 of lost income as we were trying to renovate and fix all the damage.
But Mills has a short-term rental insurance policy, or so he thought.
I found out through the process that policy was actually a landlord policy that was marketed as a short-term rental property policy.
Under that policy, Mills says certain damage was not covered.
Damage that's caused by a tenant intentionally. So it could be theft or intentional vandalism.
Attorney Evan Kane says there's not a one-size-fits-all policy for any type of insurance coverage.
The key boils down to what the policy language says. So every policy is different, and you have to read the policy language to make sure you are getting what you think you are buying.
It's a costly lesson, but one Mills says he's learned from.
It doesn't matter whether it's a huge insurance company or not. I think the most important thing is that you need to know what's in your policy.
Now, you think after going through all this, $10,000, the damage, this insurance fiasco, Mills would be done renting out his home, but he tells me he got a new insurance policy, one he's triple checked, and he says he will be renting out his home again in the future. Live in Midtown, Lauren Posen, Channel 2 Action.
See, very straight up, it said short-term rental. He strongly felt that he was covered, and vandalism happened to his property, and he's out 10 grand plus upwards of $3,000 of loss of revenue. He had a short-term rental policy, so he thought. So it said on the form, and I'm sure we can all take a wild guess of where Brady insures his properties now, how we got use of said video and his information. And this next couple of slides is actually stuff pulled directly from his insurance policy that he had. So DP, dwelling landlord form, branded for short-term rental. Again, landlord insurance policy designed for long-term rentals, but has been tagged as short-term rental insurance policy. One thing I kind of want to note as we go into these details here is that rental is rental. There's no insurance policy out there that specifically has an exclusion for short-term rental. It is the exclusions fall under some of these line language of what is and what is not covered by a roomer or boarder or a tenant of your property, and that's what makes it not. But further, just below that, they'll state, we exclude losses caused by vandalism, malicious mischief, theft, or any other unlawful taking of property by any tenant or any roomers and boarders of your premises. So effectively, that's why this claim was denied. It is a malicious mischief, a party thrown, vandalism and theft caused to the property. We like to call it property entrustment. You've entrusted your property to somebody and they cause damage. The insurance company can very easily call that negligence on your part for not entrusting your property to a safe individual, or a sane individual, if you will, thus resulting in property damage. That's your own fault, not the insurance company's. That's where this type of policy becomes not good coverage for a vacation rental, because you never know what might happen with your short-term guest. But let's imagine if this was a liability claim. Somebody got hurt or assaulted at this party, and it turned into a liability claim. Premises liability of $500,000 is what's written on that contract. Premises liability applies to bodily injury and property damage only if the bodily injury or property damage occurs on your premises and during the policy period shown in the deck page. Key here is on your premises. Any liability claim on premises liability coverage, whether it's a $500,000 limit, $1 million limit, you could have a $100 million umbrella, doesn't matter. It is premises liability. Any accident or claim happening off your property line that you were named in a lawsuit of as said property owner of that address, you do not have coverage for liability. You are now paying out of pocket for your legal defense and any claim. So if one of these party goers had assaulted a neighbor off the property address and that neighbor sued Brady Mills, no coverage for liability. So it's something important to keep looking at and making sure what the coverage territory of your liability is.
Now Nick, may I ask a question? This also includes, when you talk about the liability insurance, it just brings up what happened in California a few weeks back with the shootings. So in a situation like that, covered. All right, cool.
Yeah, so and we'll dive into proper insurance coverage and our what's excluded, what's covered, et cetera. But if you want to take any of these examples that I'm giving you, these examples that I'm giving you throughout this presentation are examples that would otherwise be covered and responded to on our insurance policy. Reason being is the commercial insurance application that we use versus the premises or landlord coverage or the standard homeowners insurance, which will be our next example here on our next slide. So again, insurance is a contract, and are you covered for renting under homeowners insurance? Well, another example of a claim denial, Emily Ritter versus Travelers Commercial Insurance Company. Here's the case number, Supreme Court of California, County of Napa. As of when I did all this research last year, it was still in court as of 2018. So I haven't checked to see if it's settled yet, but either way, this was an open case that you can do some research on. Tree fell on the guest house. The guest house was set up as a short-term rental on Airbnb for 14 days. Caused $100,000 in damage, which is covered under all homeowners insurance. Nobody really is going to exclude wind or trees falling. But Travelers Insurance ended up flat denying her claim, and thus Emily is now suing. Emily contacted Proper in May of 2017. It's the only reason, again, we know about this because she's now a client of ours. And her statement, I believe situations like this is why your company exists and why everyone is talking about Proper on the STR host community boards. Now, I want to look a little bit as to a couple of examples in homeowners insurance on why this could have been declined by Travelers Insurance. The tree damage claim had nothing to do with a short-term rental guest. And so because there was no guest at the time of the loss, how is it possible for them to decline it? Very easily they could, we would understand like, oh, they don't cover short-term rentals and short-term rental damage is not covered. And this is a tree falling, has nothing to do with a short-term guest. Again, insurance is a contract, and in that contract language for homeowners insurance, this is the actual form number found on most homeowners insurance policies, ISO HO 00031000. We do not cover other structures rented or held for rental to any person not a tenant of the dwelling. Okay, well that's pretty thin. There's really no definitions of tenants in homeowners insurance policies, and a short-term renter would more or less be considered a guest and not a tenant. It's very possible that this is what they took for the claim denial. This is the big reason. This is a huge item that we see in a lot of insurance policies, and the biggest gap with short-term rentals, the exclusion for business activity. In this particular case, we do not cover other structures from which any business is conducted. So you have your primary home and then a detached ADU that you're conducting a business out of short-term renting, this business activity exclusion could very well be what ended up being the cause of the claim denial. Business activity is defined in insurance as a trade, profession, or occupation engaged in on a full-time, part-time, or occasional basis, or any activity engaged in for money or other compensation except the following: receives no more than $2,000 in total compensation for the 12 months of volunteer activities and home daycare. So I suppose if you're short-term renting to the amount of making less than $2,000 a year, then you necessarily wouldn't fall under the business activity exclusion. However, I would suspect 99.9% of everybody in the vacation rental industry is more or less looking at making some type of revenue stream so they can pay their mortgage or add to their portfolio, et cetera, et cetera. So this business activity exclusion is what's going to come in play most cases as to your largest gap in coverage as a vacation rental operator, because you are operating in an occupation, full-time, part-time, or occasional, and generating more than $2,000 in total compensation over a 12-month period. This could have also been denied as a result of concealment. I mean, ultimately, if they intentionally withheld the information that they were short-term renting their property, and then it came to light as the time of the claim that they were short-term renting, then you have this item of concealment, which gives the underwriter the ability to deny any claim, whether it's a covered cause of loss or not on the contract. Not saying Emily made false statements, but it leads into, you really need to have that conversation with your insurance agent as to exactly what you're doing at the property, and get written confirmation from the underwriter, not the agent, but the actual underwriter, that you have the coverage you're actually looking for. Now, 10 years ago, this claim never would have been investigated. It just would have been plain, paid out, done deal, move on. But nowadays, with the popularity of short-term renting and the fact that these large domestic carriers are too big to fail, they've simply decided to start denying coverage based on the contract language. At the end of the day, they don't care. It's not a covered cause of loss. They're not insuring you as a vacation rental operator. They're insuring it as a primary home or a long-term rental, not a short-term rental. And they'll just deny the claim. And then you're kind of left there trying to figure out what to do. So you need to pull out your insurance policy. You need to call your agent, and you need to get it in writing from that underwriter you're insured through that they're going to pay claims for certain items with vacation renting. These are it. These are the questions to ask. If I regularly entrust my property home to a paying short-term vacation rental guest for 3 days, and that guest damages or steals my property, do I have property coverage? And to add to that, how much property coverage? Do I have a limitation of only $5,000 or $10,000 for damage caused by a guest, or am I insured to policy limits that I'm paying for? In regards to liability, if I entrust my property home to a paying short-term vacation rental guest for 3 days, and that guest is injured on my property or injured someone else, do I have liability coverage when I'm named in the lawsuit? And these are questions you need to get answered, again, from the underwriter and not the insurance agent. So we went through landlord insurance, we went through homeowners insurance. Now this is proper insurance. We strongly feel commercial insurance is superior, and that's why we use it as the building block of our policy. It has the horsepower needed to cover things like vandalism, and it does not cover rental or occupancy exclusions that we went over here. Commercial liability automatically extends off premises. So for those of you with amenities like canoes, kayaks, bicycles, etc., pet-friendly properties, you name it, you have that additional coverage for liability if you're named in a lawsuit. It also automatically extends to anybody acting as real estate manager. So if you're using a property management company, then they're automatically insured, because any property management company is going to require to be listed as an additional insured on your liability. That happens automatically with commercial insurance. But commercial insurance has its limitations. So just because you're going out and buying a commercial insurance policy does not necessarily mean you have particular coverage that you might be looking for. Commercial insurance generally excludes liquor liability. If you are in Napa Valley and you host a bottle of wine, you want to be on the lookout for those limitations. Animal liability for those who are pet friendly. Typically, assault and battery are excluded. Personal and advertising injury may or may not be covered on your commercial insurance either. That would be things like invasion of privacy lawsuits. Think of it as emotional injury. Limitations on theft for property entrustment. Terms of vacancy, limits on damage by the renter. Do you have coverage for backups in sewers and drains? Do you have additional ordinance or law coverage? There's a lot of details here, conversations we can have when we get on the phone. Just know that none of these items are excluded on the proper insurance policy. We actually build all this stuff back into our coverage. So there's plenty of commercial insurance programs to choose from. Lloyd's of London, that's us, Proper Insurance. We are the only Lloyd's of London program in the entire world with this particular coverage package. So just because you might have a Lloyd's of London policy now does not necessarily mean you have the coverage. If you're not insured through Proper, you don't have our package. Western World, CBIZ, they're probably the closest to our coverage out there in the US. Auto owners, local agents sell that. That's a commercial policy. Scottsdale Insurance, another commercial insurance application, and Berkshire Hathaway. Companies like Foremost, Lexington, American Modern, they don't sell commercial programs. You can get commercial programs through State Farm, maybe USAA. I don't necessarily know if they have a commercial or not, mostly residential insurance there. Farmers Insurance, I mean, you can get commercial policies through them, but it does not, again, it's not necessarily built for vacation rental. It's just a commercial policy, and so those standard limitations apply because that has been redesigned similar to what we've done. One thing that always comes up is free insurance from my hosting platform. Airbnb, Verbo, they offer $1 million in free insurance. What's going on here? The free insurance is a great tool to get you to host your property on the website. Airbnb was semi-smart in 2009. Well, maybe it was 2010, 2011 when this came out, but they understood that there wasn't specific insurance for vacation rentals. So they have this free insurance. You have the host guarantee and the host protection. I've heard good stories. I've heard bad stories. Unfortunately, there's more bad stories than good. And those bad stories typically come from pretty significant size claims. We have stuff on our website about it on our blog. These are all hyperlinks, and I guess, Judah, I could probably send these to you so that you can put them on your website or in a package or something like that folks can click on. But basically, Airbnb hosts, the first one, Maryland house trashed to the tune of $10,000, very similar to the Brady Mills experience, only that homeowner went to get coverage through Airbnb for the vandalism to her property. Hadn't heard back. 2 years has gone by, nothing from the host guarantee. This other one, the homeowner rented out the house on Airbnb. Happens to kind of like the Orinda situation. There was a homicide at her house. No response again from Airbnb. I haven't dove in further, at least from any lawsuit standpoint. I haven't been able really to find anything in a simple search if she's actually getting sued. If you look at the Orinda example, the homeowner, the city of Orinda, and Airbnb are being sued by the family members of some of those who were slain in that shooting. So what's the response going to be? You say I have free liability, but we're seeing all of these examples of them actually not paying out. At the end of the day, you don't have your name on an insurance policy. When you set your property up on a hosting platform, they do not send you a certificate of liability insurance that says, hey, you're actually covered. Here's your name, your property address on your limit of insurance that you get for being a part of us. I mean, think of it like hotels.com. Hotels.com is simply a technology website that companies like Hilton and Marriott can use to put rooms out. They do not give free insurance every time a room is booked in one of those hotels. They're responsible for their own insurance. And in the name of humanizing the host, you are not Airbnb. So you do not have Airbnb insurance. You need to go out and get your own insurance and make sure that you are protected against any of these property or liability claims that could be potential hazards at your property. Again, you need to have your own insurance policy that you pay for, that you have control over, with your name on it, and you understand how you're covered. I mean, you should have a 100-page document with your coverage on it. So again, I mean, be mindful of free insurance. We love Airbnb, we love Vrbo, we love HomeAway. These companies have been great to us, but do not rely on a technology company to provide and give you free insurance. It's just non-existent. As far as proper insurance, just a quick overview. Again, we completely protect your vacation rental business as an all-inclusive insurance policy that replaces your current coverage. Commercial package policy for your building, your contents, your income, liability coverage of $1 million per occurrence, $2 million aggregate. We can bump those limits up higher if you want. We don't have vacancy clauses. We build back in liability coverage for animals, pets, alcohol, pools, hot tubs, exercise equipment, small watercraft, golf carts, et cetera, et cetera. We have a one-of-a-kind endorsement for bed bug extermination with loss of income, $0 deductible, $15,000 in coverage. Custom built with Lloyd's of London, specific for this application. This is not a patched together policy from different coverages for different types of activity, trying to fill a need or a gap. It is purpose built for exactly what you're doing. You're not going to find a more comprehensive coverage on the market, but it does come at an additional insurance expense. But I do feel that professional operators truly understand, what they're getting for that additional insurance premium.